exception of like,
Sorry to interrupt. I just realized I hadn't done it. I'm the
no
worst.
problem. It's gone out of fashion versus, 10, 15 years ago. Those people on the call who will remember, the old days where it was, it was hugely important. And that it likely is still relevant in more regulated industries. I've been in a tech startup for 10 years now, so I'm a little out of the loop on, more certain kinds of heavily regulated industries and tools where those certs really, convey a certain, being at a certain level. So quickly on resumes, my experience specifically of engineers and their resumes, and this is just in general, like I'm about to just stereotype, it's just, again, my experience is that they're too long. When you're going through resumes for engineers, a lot of the times they literally on average run 5+ pages. They're too long. Your resume really shouldn't ever be longer than 2 pages. There are ways to get your experience on there, just, a little crisper. It's not easy. I hate writing my resume. I hate rewriting my resume, and I've been in this line of work a long time, and I wouldn't actually say that I'm gifted at it either. I'm okay at it for other people. I'm kind of not gifted at it for myself. So not an easy task. And careful about the lists. I think some recruiters can be kind of jaded about, like, when you have a ton of things, a ton of languages, a ton of tooling. If you're, maybe just commit to the ones that you are expert to intermediate at, and and try to trust that if you've been doing certain roles, then there's certain assumption making that goes on, that you know how to use other tools, or that you can pick it up quickly because you've used something. Who cares about Docker if your container tools, container, OS, you've got some game, right?
Actually, that's a great transition to the next question, which I'm going to combine a couple of different questions that are kind of on the same theme. So cool. I think a lot of people in our community are coming from non-traditional backgrounds, don't have that CS degree, have like non-tech work, freelance work, gaps in the resume. How do you recommend people tell those stories when, and especially like auto screeners, like how much you see auto screeners triggering these kinds of problems, but basically for your non-standard kind of applicant? I know everyone's a little non-standard, but people with non-traditional backgrounds.
I hear that. I feel very non-standard myself, but no, I hear that. Sorry. It's like we are getting into where I'm fairly politicized, because it's just, it's tough for underrepresented, non-traditional talent, or whatever phrase we want to use, particularly in tech. So gaps specifically, gaps are normal. Like we're all humans. We have lives. Gaps are normal. My recommendation, I'm still a fan of chronological resumes. A lot of make a recruiter's job as easy as possible, particularly if they're not as energetic as I would like. And so one of those ways is just to help them just track sort of, what have you done, the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, right? In some sort of order, right? So if you have a gap, I appreciate a very just sort of general, quick explanation, 6 months, family reasons, or 6 months sabbatical or something like that. It's not anybody's business, certainly not mine. It's no one's business if you were taking care of an ailing parent, or just, on a video game, role-playing adventure for a month, it's no one's business. But some sort of just explanation can be helpful, again, just for if it's recruiters looking at it, just for tracking purposes. I don't vector too much on transitions, okay, why'd you leave here? Why? But if you look on paper, if you can look on paper, sort of a hopper, you can help a recruiting individual, particularly as they're then reporting to the hiring manager. Hey, here's a human to look at, you can in black and white help that recruiter explain, your transitions. So, and again, just a couple of words like, recruited out, to this other place, or contract ended, or, whatever it is. There are many hiring managers, sadly, in the world, in my experience. I'm just a tiny speck in the universe, but that I guess I've seen a lot, that have a bias against people who have, if they're looking for a full-time employee hire, they have a bias against people who have exclusively contracted, or mostly contracted for the last however long of a chunk of time. So that can be a bit of a, sort of a hurdle to get over. And again, for better or for worse, that's a situation where people had talked about networking for a little bit before this time slot. And the more that you can help them sort of, just see you as skilled and able to come in and do this job. And you're also going to want to have just script yourself a bit, and anybody can help you. It doesn't have to be a HR professional, recruiting professional. Everybody that I've seen so far and listened to ask questions in BDI camp would be a fabulous person to just say, hey, if you were a manager hiring and I said, hey, I'm ready for an in-house role and here's why. But you definitely want to prepare yourself with a little bit of a crisp script around, I want to be, should be, need be an FTE at this point, and here's why. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like in my personal experience, and also what I see out in the industry for people, is that especially for underrepresented people in tech, I missed the part of the recording where you talked about the trauma of job searching, but there's also trauma at work, and often jobs will become kind of untenable because of a traumatic incident, and then sort of fall out from that. And so I feel like there's so much fear. I see so many people who are underrepresented at work having fear around resume gaps, because they think it'll stop them from getting a job, but then they're also kind of in these just really unbearable situations at work. And so it's nice to kind of have tools to talk about those gaps. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of scripting.
Yeah.
And I just feel confident that you all likely have somebody or somebody's in your life where you can run things past them. But it's like the ultimate, it's a particular challenge, isn't it? That you can have a situation, whether personally, professionally, both, where you feel very small. And when you're job seeking, you need to be big and bad, sort of hashtag living your best life, right? And that's what you're trying to put forward. And then you add on to that, like in my case, neurodivergence. You add perhaps just being socially awkward. It doesn't have to be a mental health disorder or or a neuro disorder like I have. It could be any number of things. That's just like that fear. I guess what I'm trying to say, Tara, is that fear makes perfect. It's so logical to me. And I don't have any brilliant, I'm not Brene Brown or whatever. I don't have any brilliant advice beyond, you kind of have to sort of you got to push past it. You just got, like, in order to just, try to present in the best possible way. Because chances are, like, you have so much to offer. Awesome. Again, I mean, even just the sessions I hit yesterday, like, everybody is just really impressive and doing neat stuff and iterating in really cool ways. And just, it's that work of trying to get a foot in the door and help them see you the way that, I would likely see you, or Tara sees you, It's not easy at all.
All right. I'm going to ask one last hiring question and then getting hired question. Have you found sort of industries or niches that are more inclusive in general? So if people are marginalized and looking for a friendly work environment, do you kind of have suggestions?
It's funny, my answer to this is that this feels really case by case to me. I don't know. I can't point to, at least from my experience and from everything I read and hear, I can't point to an industry I wish there was a magical, mystical industry that we could all go join, but not that I know of. If anybody, has an answer to this, please chime in. I think, people tend to think of like NGO, they think of nonprofit, and sure, and maybe particularly nonprofit that's, that's sort of where the mission or the impact is actually tied to whatever your cultural identifier is, or what you're an activist around, right? And nonprofits are still groups of human beings, and groups of human beings are massively dysfunctional and broken in all kinds of ways. So no place is perfect, right? There are two things I would say to that real quick. One, I think here's my answer. I think about it at this point more as a company-based, deal. So I think about it more as like, what companies, might I want to join? And I would recommend that you have a dream list. If you go to, DrupalCon, if you go to like stuff like I go to, Blacks in Tech or Women Who Code or SWE or whatever it is, right? And you see an awesome speaker or presenter, or you have a great conversation with another, developer, et cetera. And you think, wow, this could be cool, knowing that it's probably not perfect and there are things that are broken there too, but it attracts you. Like, just maintain that list, because there's absolutely no reason in the world that you can't go work wherever that is one day. There's no place that's too hallowed for you, I promise you, right? So company-based, there are some lists. There are scorecards that some organizations keep, and they put them out every year, so they refresh them. Some of them have Hall of Fame kind of lists as well. And two that I trust, HRC is the Human Rights Campaign. So it's an LGBT plus lens, just to be clear, although it can be it can show an openness in general if a place is particularly inclusive to LGBT plus humans. And so Tara, do you mind putting I put the URLs in our working doc. Sorry, Tara's more gifted at these things than I am. So we'll put them in chat what I'm referring to. Diversity Inc. does a diversity equity index. So that's a more broad, sort of companies that are the best places to work from a diversity angle. And I know the organization and I trust the list. And then I was thinking particularly about people with disabilities. And I just want to say out loud, this index, I did my homework before this morning. And so the list seems credible to me, but that one is not as known to me. So again, if anybody has better ideas, actually, if you do, and we're not all together, let Tara know, and Tara will let me know, because I'll always love options. But that's run by the American Association for People with Disabilities. So again, if that's a reputable organization to you. So that's one answer, is like, there are some good, some credible sort of, reliable resources out there for examining, are these companies, do they have some game around diversity, equality, inclusion? And then the other thing I would say is the cliche about how like you're discerning when you're job seeking as much as the employer is, like, you're finding out about them as much as you can. And I totally understand if you're not feeling like you're really coming from a place of power, that it can not feel like that all the time. I get it. But I strongly encourage you to really ask and really dig. And you are well within your rights to ask to speak to somebody that wasn't put forward in your interview plan. Let's say nobody that would be a teammate is in your interview plan. And you think that they're interested in you, you feel interested in them. Hey, can I just talk to somebody who'd be a coworker? That you're 100% within your rights, not an abnormal request. And what does that boss really like to work for? So off the top of my head, like I'll ask people, what was a really good day last 6 months, however you want to put it, and why. What was a bad day? It was just a tough day, and why. You'd be surprised sometimes how much answers to questions like that you can start to probe based on their answer, because if they speak to a bad day that hints at issues with leadership, stakeholders, their ability to influence or not, have a voice or not, and the ubiquitous culture but that if there's something there that's coming out versus like, we found out that this code is so broken that, we're never going to come back from it, that feels to me more like something that might even actually be a fun puzzle for you to go solve. I don't know.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to switch now to hiring and inclusivity. And a lot of the questions we have are around sort of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So one question is, how do you promote or ensure diversity when you have a small team with small reach and small budget for hiring?
Yeah. If you happen to be the person that asked this question, feel free to speak up or put stuff in chat, because I feel like I might be able to be helpful to you quickly, like individually, depending on your circumstance. But so I guess two answers, because one is really around hiring, I would assume. And the other is around engaging and retaining and developing your underrepresented talent, right? Which is equally, if not even more important. So I think number one, the fact that you're asking the question is great. It probably seems normal to you, whoever asked, but it's sadly, it's not necessarily the norm. So, there's everybody thinks about diversity different ways, right? So if you have an obvious lack of sort of optical diversity, looking at your team, it's all men, it's all women, it's all Caucasian, all Asian, whatever, and so you can and should explicitly target talent that has different cultural identifiers, right, than what you have. I am just as interested at this point in my career in like diversity of thought, right? So the kinds of people that just simply don't think the same way that the other members of the team do. They're going to ask different questions. They're going to mix things up because they just don't approach, problems and challenges the way that you naturally do, or that other members of the team do. I understand that can be difficult to assess for, believe me. But to me, that's just as important as sort of the more optical diversity. I have been running searches the last few years, actually, where if I would, let's say I was targeting certain cultural identifiers, I just didn't talk to anybody else. I only reached out to XYZ. When I was recruiting, and you're well within your rights if you have in-house recruiters to ask them to do that if you're doing it yourself. And then of course, if that pool of talent just wasn't enough, or people just weren't hitting the mark for the job, then of course you expand out from there and you get broader and broader in your seeking. But and then we definitely don't have enough time to talk about like assessment, like how tech talent gets assessed. But I would strongly encourage those of you who are in a position where you hire or you influence hires. I totally get for a mid or senior tech position that they need to be able to do some things in order to come in and be successful themselves, but also to contribute. But boy, tech screening is in my experience, it rules out a lot of underrepresented talent. It just does. I mean, like there's a lot of white papers, but I'm just telling you from anecdotal experience as well. And so I think just all we can do is just keep questioning it, keep making changes, keep valuing what you're learning, from the person or even from someone that they worked for in the past, et cetera. Weigh that as heavily, if not even more so than how they scored. And also keep in mind that any kind of testing, for someone who has a learning difference is uniquely challenging and not necessarily representative really at all of their actual skills on the job. So, and the budget thing, like diversity hiring and certainly developing diverse talent doesn't cost money. Like what you need is ideally is a recruiting partner HR partner or yourself. And believe me, I know you have a very busy job, all of you, and it ain't easy, particularly when you have open seats. But you all know where the magic boards are. Are people out on Reddit, or are you using GitHub, or on people? We use people's individual blogs. We're on YouTube looking at talent. You all are far more expert than I am at all the secret places that people hide online. But targeting, just that it's a puzzle, right? It's, sourcing is a fun, to me, it's an incredibly fun puzzle, but going out there and finding this talent, and then you'd be surprised. It doesn't matter that they work at whatever you think is fancy. You'd be surprised what will attract you being you and saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Do you want to come join? I just had a tech sourcer, not too long ago, who figured out that someone had written a white paper on something that they probably weren't getting to do. They were in gaming now. And so, we reached out saying, hey, you probably don't get to do this, and it seems like you're really passionate about it. You could do a little bit of it, with the Kubernetes and stuff at our company. That the person got back. This is somebody who normally we would just go in the, they don't even read in mails on LinkedIn probably. So you just trust, have some faith that if you are yourself and you're passionate and you're inspired, that you will be inspiring to others. And it's not, they're not necessarily living the life of Riley just because they're at, I don't know what, Twitter or Google or et cetera.
Such good advice. We're at time. Thank you so much, Katie. I'm going to drop Katie.
I hope this was helpful.
Was for me. I'm getting some thank yous in my DMs and stuff. So I think you're helpful to other folks as well. Like I said, I'll drop your LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to connect.
Yeah. McGonigal, not a lot of McGonigals out there. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn. And, if I can be there's nothing more fun for me than to connect awesome, underrepresented humans to opportunity, right? Like that's what it's all about. And I learn when I get to interact with people like yourselves. I learn just as much from you as you might, from me. So it's win-win.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for your time on this Saturday morning.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks to all of you for hanging out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks all for coming. I will plug the DDI careers channel again in Drupal Slack. Great place to get resume review. Great place to talk about if you just went through a hazing experience that looked like an interview, but was actually just someone being jerked to you. Whatever support you need in your career searching, we're there, and we're also helpful. I think on the other side of things, as a hiring person, there's a lot of great candidates in our community, and I think, yeah, it's so important. My life got so much better when I got a good tech job versus my pre-tech job, which was terrible. So it's so important to get people good jobs.
Amen.
So thank you for bringing your wisdom here. I'm going to go ahead and take a break. We're going to start at 30 after with diverse teams are better teams, how to improve inclusive hiring practices. So very career day
I'm excited
here.
for that one.
Awesome. Me too. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.